Welcome to my channel. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Vlogmas Day 14. As you may know, I have been focused lately on certain disappearances of children across the USA who happen to vanish right on or very close to Christmas. This week, we are going to turn our attention to the mysterious disappearance of the Sodder children in West Virginia in 1945. Let's begin with the story of George Sodder, who was actually born Giorgio Sodder in Tula, Sardinia, Italy, 1895. Now, Giorgio immigrated to the USA when he was 13 years old with his older brother, who immediately went back to Italy as soon as both boys had cleared customs at Ellis Island. And for the rest of his life, Giorgio became known as George. He never wanted to talk about his native country or why he left it. George eventually found work on the railroads in Pennsylvania, and his task would be to carry supplies to the railroad workers. And after a few years of doing that, he took on more permanent work as a driver in Smithers, West Virginia. He then started his own trucking company, initially hauling earth, to construction sites, and then he later hauled coal that would be mined in the region. Now, Jenny Cipriani, a storekeeper's daughter in Smithers, also emigrated from Italy in her childhood, and she ended up marrying George in 1922. This sounds like a very fascinating story to me. And now the Sodders, Jenny and George, decided to settle outside of a nearby village, Fayetteville, which had a large population of Italian immigrants. And they ended up living in a two-story timber frame house 2 miles north of town. In 1923, they had their first of what would eventually become a family of 10 children. Woo! Now, George's trucking company began to prosper, and the couple became one of the most respected middle-class families around the words of certain local officials. However, George had very, very strong opinions about many subjects, and he was not shy about expressing them, sometimes dividing people into their own separate groups. And so I guess he was very verbally aggressive about it. Now, I don't know if any of you were around at that time or maybe had grandparents who remember this, but at the time in Italy, the dictator Benito Mussolini had rose to enormous power. And so George was he was very much against Mussolini, and he actually began many heated arguments in opposition to this dictator. And so he actually argued with this, about this with other members of the immigrant community in West Virginia. So that's something interesting that we should keep in the back of our minds. So let's fast forward just a little bit to a few years before the 5 Sodder children, 5 of the 10 Sodder children actually went missing. And this is when, in 1942, the last of the Sodder children was actually born. And by then, the second oldest son, Joe, 17, had already left home to serve in the military during World War II. In 1943, Mussolini in Italy was deposed, and then he was put to rest. And however, George's criticism of that late dictator had left some hard feelings lingering in his community. And so, in October 1945, a visiting life insurance salesman was rebuffed by George, and then he warned George that his house would go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed. Wow! And this salesman, he cursed George, all because of the dirty remarks George made about Mussolini. So the population there was quite divided with respect to Mussolini. And another visitor to the house who was seeking work took the opportunity to go around to the back and warn George that a pair of fuse boxes would cause a fire someday. Now that made me very suspicious. And so George was actually puzzled by the remark and the observation, since he had just had his whole house rewired. And that was when they had the electric stove installed. This was around 1945. And so the local electric company said afterwards that, no, we can assure you that it's very safe. It's all very safe. In the weeks before Christmas of 1945, George's older son had noticed a strange car. The older sons, meaning not the one that was off at war, but the next to oldest sons. They had noticed a strange car parked along the main highway through town. And yeah, that would be very suspicious indeed. And the people in the car appeared to be watching the youngest Sodder children as they walked to and from school. Wow, that reminds me of a little talk I had with you guys quite recently. All right, those series of events eventually bring us to Christmas Eve 1945. And I should add that the Sodder family all celebrated Christmas Eve at the house in 1945. And the oldest daughter, 19, her name was Marion. She had been working at a dime store in downtown Fayetteville, and she surprised 3 of her younger sisters, Martha, 12, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, with new toys that she bought for them as Christmas gifts. And so the younger girls were so excited that they asked their mother if they could stay up past their bedtime to play with them. At 10 p.m., Jenny not the child, but Jenny the mom, Jenny Sodder, told the 3 girls that they could stay up a little past 10 p.m. as long as the 2 oldest boys, 14-year-old Maurice and 9-year-old Louis, remembered to put the cows in and feed the chickens before going to bed themselves. Now, gee, I wonder if that was such a great idea. I guess everybody was really tired. And so George and the 2 older boys, who were older than the older boys, John, 22, and George Jr., 16, who had worked all day with their father, were already fast asleep. And so, after reminding the children of those tasks that they had to do, Jenny took Sylvia, the littlest one, who was 3 years old, upstairs to bed with her and George, and they went to bed. They fell asleep. Now this next part is a little suspicious and very creepy. And at 12:30 a.m., past midnight, their telephone rang. You know, Christmas Eve, late at night. And so the mom, Jenny, woke up and went downstairs to answer it. Because then they didn't have extensions. There was basically one phone through the main line of the house, and that would be it. Extensions were not very well known in those days. So the caller happened to be a woman whose voice was quite unfamiliar, and the woman asked for a name that did not belong to the Sodder family. And so what happened was, when Jenny was listening to the caller, she could hear in the background some sounds like glasses clinking, and Jenny told the woman that she had the wrong number. And so she later recalled, after she remembered this story and began to tell it after what happened, which I'm going to tell you in a minute, she remembered that the woman laughed and that she had a very weird laugh. So that's creepy. And so Jenny hung up and just simply went back to bed. And as she did, she noticed that the lights were still on and the curtains were not drawn. Two things that the children normally attended to when they stayed up later than their parents, that they already would have done. So something was off. Now Marion had, the older daughter, had fallen asleep in the living room, right on the living room couch. So Jenny assumed that the other children who stayed up had simply gone back to their rooms where they slept, and she assumed that they went to sleep. But now, when we look back at this, we're going to figure out that it probably was not the case. And so Jenny ended up closing the curtains, turning out the lights, and she returned to bed. But a half hour later, at 1 a.m., Jenny was again awakened by the sound of an object hitting the house's roof with a loud bang and then a rolling noise. I don't think it was Santa Claus. After hearing nothing further, she went back to sleep. I couldn't have done that. I could not have done that. She must have been half asleep. And after another half hour, at 1:30, she woke up again, smelling smoke. And when Jenny got up, she found that the room that George had used for his office was burning. And it was burning around the telephone line and right near the fuse box. So Jenny woke him up, and George woke up his older sons. Now, George, Jenny, and 4 of the children, Marion, the oldest, and Sylvia, the youngest, and the 2 older boys, John and George Jr., escaped the house unharmed. They all frantically yelled to the girls upstairs, but they heard no response, and they could not go up there because the staircase itself was already flaming. And so John said that in his first police interview after the fire, that he did go up to the attic to alert his sisters, though he later changed his story to say that he only called up there and did not actually see them. So maybe he did try to go up there, but he couldn't actually make it right up there. What a weird Christmas Eve. And so efforts to find assistance and rescue their children, the three girls, were unexpectedly complicated because, of course, the telephone did not work. And so Marion, in that case, ran to a neighbor's house to call the fire department. And a driver on the nearby road had also seen flames and called from a nearby tavern. And they too were unsuccessful, either because they could not reach the operator or because the phone there turned out to be broken. Oh, it's kind of got this Twilight Zone quality to it that really makes the story so much more fascinating. And so either the neighbor or the passing motorist was eventually successful in reaching the fire department from another telephone in the center of the city. Wow. I'm trying to imagine all that, and I can't. George Sr., the father, who had no shoes on, attempted to climb the house outside of its wall, like on the outside. And he broke open a window, but cut his arm in the process. And so he and his older sons intended to use a ladder to reach the attic and rescue the girls. But it was not in his usual spot against the house. And so they couldn't find the ladder, guys. Oh, this is weird. Something had to have been going on before those children went to play. A water barrel that could have been used to extinguish the fire was actually frozen solid. And so George then tried to pull both of the trucks that he used in his business up to the house and used them to climb up to the attic window, but neither of them would start. Despite having worked perfectly during the day previously. I don't know, guys. This story is, somebody has definitely messed with the Sodder family. Frustrated, the 6 Sodders, the parents and the 4 children who had escaped, had no choice but to simply sit and watch the house burn down and collapse on Christmas Eve over the next 45 minutes. They assumed that the other 5 children had perished in the blaze. And so the fire department, low on manpower that night due to the war and probably due to the holiday, they relied on individual firefighters to call each other. And they did not respond until later that morning. Oh my goodness. And so Chief Morris said on Christmas Day that the already slow response was further hampered by an inability to drive the fire truck, requiring that he wait until someone who could drive was available. Why was he driving? I don't understand. I guess he couldn't drive. That's all I'm going to say about that. And so the firefighters, one of whom was a brother of Johnny's, could do little else but look through the ashes that were left in the Sodders' basement. And by 10 a.m., Morris told the Sodders that they had not found any bones, as they might have expected if other children had transpired in the fire. So, according to another account, they did find a few bone fragments and internal organs, but chose not to tell the family? Boy, the news papers must have been a mess in those days. It has also been noted by modern fire professionals that their search was very perfunctory. It was not thorough, and it was quite late. And so nevertheless, Chief Morris believed that the 5 children who had vanished had died in the fire, and that assumption suggests that the fire had been intense and hot enough to burn those bodies completely. What a terrible tragedy, and it's so mysterious too. We will continue with the aftermath of this terrible fire that occurred on Christmas Eve, 1945, next week. And so until then, I will leave you just to think about this story. And, what do you think happened? I don't know what happened. It sounds like a mighty confusing story to me. In a funk now, and I think I need something to jolly me out of this mood. And I was thinking I might try and prepare us a bit of a Christmas drink. And I happen to have on hand here a little vodka. Now, vodka is definitely not a favorite of my alcoholic beverages. I prefer white wine or maybe a little rum. But I thought I would try a Christmas drink that calls for cranberries, lemon, mint, and a little sugar. And maybe we'll throw in some mineral water too. So, of course, we're going to put some of this in it too. And so hold on a bit while I go and grab the cranberries and whip up this drink. Or also orange juice, cherries, and ginger ale, but I don't have those on hand. So I'm just going to show you what I'm using, and we'll take it from there. shall we? Cheers. I really like it. Although it would taste so much better with the ginger ale and the orange, and the cherries and the syrup. This is really delightful. Oh, it's so different, you know? It's so, how do I explain it? Just delicious. So, here's to Vlogmas Day 14, and thank you so much for listening and watching, and please don't forget to subscribe. I guess I'll see you tomorrow.